Welcome to another episode of Cal's Corner radio show here on X Zone Broadcast Network. My name is Kal Korff and I'm your host. Welcome back, folks. Okay, tonight's show hopefully will be interesting. We're going to cover, or try to at least in this hour, three different major subjects. The first of which is going to be Russian President Vladimir Putin's recent chest beating and announcement and bravado about their new generation nuclear weapons, which they are deploying. So they're real. It's more than just a verbal promise or threat, if you will. We'll be talking about communist China and what they've been up to. As usual, a lot of skullduggery there. And the third news event will be about communist North Korea and the recent breaking news that President Donald Trump will maybe be meeting with the dictator of North Korea in a couple of months. All right, let's start with Russia. Now, recently, Russian President Vladimir Putin gave his recent State of the Union speech in his country, where he showcased some of his nation's newest and deadliest weapons that Russia has ever created. Now, the question, anytime Russia likes to taunt its new weaponry and brag about its military prowess, how much of what Putin said was real versus, let's call it, typical Kremlin hyperbole? Now, in this expose here on the X Zone Broadcast Network, we're going to separate fact from fiction. So let's start with what Vladimir Putin said. Now, Putin, in his announcement, translated into English, basically said this. Putin said, "I want to tell all those who have fueled the arms race over the last 15 years, sought to win unilateral advantages over Russia, introduced unlawful sanctions aimed to contain our country's development, all of what you wanted to impede with your policies have already happened. You have failed to contain Russia." Now, he talked about a bunch of other things, of course, but that is probably the meatiest part of his remarks and the ones that we'll address here. And then we will also talk about his new weapons. So, Russian President Vladimir Putin said this, and of course his dutiful media, his obedient media, which of course the Kremlin controls, made sure that the rest of the world heard his message and repeated it everywhere. Now, while credible analysts have noted that Putin's timing, where it concerns his recent speech, which showcased his purported game-changing Russian weaponry, has been deliberately timed and politically choreographed because he's up for re-election on March 18th. Now, there's no question that Putin is indeed serious in what he says, but let's expose the truth now about Russia's known military capabilities as they pertain to what he recently announced, and will separate again fact from fiction. Now, to understand why Russia has been feverishly working on futuristic weapons, they are among the most deadly ever invented by any nation, one needs to first review a brief history of how things got to where they are today, and more importantly, you need to understand why. Now, ever since the USA pulled out of its agreement with Russia to limit its deployment of anti-missile defense systems, the Kremlin has been angry. It's understandable that they are mad. They've been mad for years. Now, their anger is largely driven by two key factors. The Russians are woefully behind America in developing anti-missile defense capabilities. The move by the United States to withdraw from the treaty has forced Russia to spend money it doesn't really have to try to develop effective countermeasures. It's not an easy thing to do. So prior to the USA terminating its participation in the Anti-Ballistic Missile Treaty, or ABMT for short, both America and Russia, then known as the Soviet Union, or Union of Soviet Socialist Republics back during the Cold War, each side was limited to deploying just a single anti-ballistic missile system equipped with no more than 100 interceptors to defend each target. So let's say the United States had three areas it wanted to defend against a theoretical missile attack by Russia. It was limited to 100 interceptors. These are missiles that would take out incoming missiles per site, per location. So if there were three locations, there were a maximum of 300 interceptors allowed. Now, predictably, when the Russians went to build their protective sites, they deployed a system to protect their capital city, Moscow, and that system is presently called the A-135. Now, what is important about this system, which consists of a bunch of pillbox-style early warning radar arrays and interceptors, is that it is fully compliant with the terms of the amended 1974 Anti-Ballistic Missile Treaty. Now, the USA deployed a similar equivalent, not to defend any city, which is rather interesting, unlike what Russia did. Instead, they defended their nuclear missiles around Grand Forks Air Force Base in the state of North Dakota. So Russia was prioritizing defending Moscow, its capital city, while the U.S. was prioritized to defending its collection of nuclear weapons. Now, the A-135 by Russia is still in use today. It's being upgraded as we broadcast this to the more robust A-235 system, which deploys a wider variety of detection and tracking systems, as well as more efficient missiles. It remains unknown whether this new deployment, because it hasn't physically happened yet, that is, it is not completed, will have artificial limits put on it, such as using only 100 interceptors. In other words, because there is no treaty at present between either Russia or the United States, we don't know if Russia is going to limit the number of interceptors in the new upgraded system to just 100. Nobody knows yet. Maybe even the Kremlin doesn't know yet. We will soon find out. So the reason that the USA pulled out of the ABMT with Russia, now this was during the presidency of George W. Bush, is because America logically and understandably foresaw viable threats emerging from rogue nations such as communist North Korea and Iran, both of whose illegal, under international laws, nuclear weapons programs posed and continue to pose a genuine threat to world peace. Now, in his now famous and controversial speech given on January 29th, 2002, now this is just months after the attacks of 9/11 against the United States by the Islamo-fascist terrorist group Al-Qaeda, Bush specifically called communist North Korea, Iran, and Iraq as being, quote, an axis of evil, unquote. What Bush meant by his remark when he first made it was absolutely misunderstood by too many people. With the Cold War between Russia and the U.S. having largely ended ever since the USSR famously imploded in 1991, the very dynamics of existential threats to world peace quickly shifted to smaller rogue nations such as North Korea and Iran. This does not include acts of terrorism. So Bush's statement, widely condemned by the naive la-la left-wing liberals and self-proclaimed progressives, has proven to be true. Now think about this. Just 5 years later, in the year 2006, North Korea detonated its first nuclear weapon, which was the byproduct of its rogue nuclear weapons program. Now armed with nukes, North Korea still today constantly threatens to attack and destroy other nations such as Japan, South Korea, and of course the United States. Now Iran, while officially denying it, also has had a rogue nuclear weapons program, one it can restart anytime it chooses to. For it lied to the world and continues on its course, even today, to develop not only nukes, but just as important, the means to deliver them by improving its ballistic and cruise missile technologies. Today, Iran now possesses both types of missiles, which can deliver miniaturized nuclear warheads, should it wish to arm any of them. Now, this means ballistic missiles, this means cruise missiles. Now, Iran has made no secret of the fact that it intends to eventually attack and wipe out the Jewish state of Israel. One means of doing it would be to overwhelm Israel's vaunted anti-missile defense systems by launching hundreds, if not thousands, of rockets and missiles. Iran can attack Israel outright with its own arsenal, or it can also unleash over 200,000 missiles against Israel via its sock puppet proxy terrorist group, Hezbollah, which is stationed in Lebanon. Now, notice that earlier, I called Al-Qaeda an Islamo-fascist terrorist group. I want to explain what I mean by that before we continue here. The Lala liberal left-wing media condemns the use of the term Islamo-fascist. Don't listen to them, folks. They're out to lunch. They don't even know what they're talking about. They are literally clueless. There is a difference between an Islamo-fascist group and an Islamist group. The left-wing liberal media likes to use the term Islamist instead because it's more politically correct. It's not accurate. An Islamist terrorist group is like the Taliban. They're not interested in world conquest. They don't care what goes on in the United States unless it affects them. An Islamo-fascist terrorist group is very different. They're united under a single, all-powerful leader, or caliph, as that individual likes to call himself, and they do seek global conquest. Examples of Islamo-fascist terrorist groups are the Islamic State and Al-Qaeda, even Hamas and Hezbollah. So there is a difference between an Islamist group which wants regional power, local power, like the Taliban in Afghanistan, versus a terrorist group that wants global power to force everyone to follow their twisted version of Islam. We'll be back after the commercial break.
Did you know that when you're on the road with limited data or Wi-Fi, you can still listen to the X-Zone Radio Show with Rob McConnell, The Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka, X-1, Dimension X, Space Patrol, and every minute of the X-Zone Broadcast Network by calling 213-401-0080, courtesy of Audio Now. No smartphone, app, or internet needed. It saves your data plan and it's free if you have unlimited minutes. Call 213-401-0080 to listen on any phone, anytime, anywhere. Remember 213-401-0080 for the best of the paranormal, parapsychology, and sci-fi radio programming anywhere, 24/7, 365.
You have heard of the X-Zone? Now watch it on Simul TV, plus 500 video games, live TV channels, free video on demand, worldwide, and more. Does this sound like tomorrow's television? Well, it is, but you can have it today, right now. It is Simul TV. Simul TV offers what the others only wish they could provide. 15 exclusive channels like X-Zone, Sci-Fi, and Horror. We are worldwide. No other provider offers that. 500 built-in video games. No need to have an extra expensive system. We have them included. Free video on demand. Live streaming events from around the world. Interactive online network, and much more. Tomorrow's TV today. Simul TV. Sound too good to be true? Well, it's not. You can have Simul TV today. Sign up at simultv.com. Do it today.
Gwilda Wiyaka's latest book, The Science of Magic Book of Mysteries, Volume 1, is the first book in a series based on her writings that open every episode of the Science of Magic radio show. Drawing on the subject matter of each guest, and armed with over 40 years' experience in shamanism, 35 years in alternative health, and degrees in psychology and religious studies, Gwilda introduces relevant and leading-edge information that supports spiritual evolution and personal empowerment. Rich with wisdom and inspirational quotes packaged in digestible segments, this is a book that will pull you from cover to cover. It will also serve as a daily inspirational reading for years to come. The Science of Magic Book of Mysteries, Volume 1 is available at our website, tsompublications.com, amazon.com, and wherever fine books are sold.
Welcome back to segment 2 here on Cal's Corner radio show here on the X Zone Broadcast Network. The executive producer of this show is Rob McConnell. My name is Kal Korff, and I'm your host. So now that we've explained the differences between an Islamist terrorist group and an Islamo-fascist terrorist group, let's get back to Russia. Now, Russian reaction to the USA pulling out of the ABMT and deciding instead to deploy missile defense weaponry around the world in concert with allies such as Japan, NATO, and Australia by using mobile and fixed multi-tier solutions such as the ship-based Aegis and land-based THAAD systems are the main reasons that Putin has directed his military to develop countermeasure weapons. Unable to compete one-on-one with superior American technology, Russia is trying to compensate for its weaknesses by making much more powerful nuclear warheads combined with much faster delivery systems such as hypersonic missiles. Now, in his speech, Putin showed an animated simulation of one of his new generation missiles attacking the state of Florida in the USA. According to Putin, the trajectory of his new intercontinental ballistic missile, or ICBM, cannot be predicted, nor can it be shot down by anything America has. Now, the problem for Putin concerning what he says is the fact that this is really nothing new. It has been common knowledge in America that the United States does not possess the ability to withstand or shoot down all the missiles or warheads that Russia would unleash against it should, God forbid, World War III happen. And this goes both ways. What I mean is this. If Russia were to launch everything it had against the U.S., there's no way the U.S. could survive that onslaught. It does not have enough weapons to shoot down incoming missiles. This has always been true. Just because the U.S. has some missile defense capabilities now doesn't mean it can stop Russia. This is also true going the other direction. If America, God forbid, were to decide to launch everything it has against Russia, Russia does not have the capability to shoot down everything that America could throw at it. So this concept of mutual assured destruction is, for better or for worse, what has driven the defense postures of both countries for decades now. The idea is simple. You cannot afford to attack me because you will be destroyed. I can't afford to attack you because I'll be destroyed. Again, mutual assured destruction. Now let's talk about drones. Most people think of what are called drones as being simple unmanned aerial vehicles, or UAVs. Now, this type of thinking is myopic because drones don't have to always be airborne, a fact that Putin proved when he boasted in his speech about a new underwater drone, which he claims is nuclear powered and has, for all practical purposes, unlimited range. Now, Putin also boasts that it has the capability, this drone, of traveling underwater at very high speeds, making it almost impossible to detect. Now, the main reason it's hard to detect, folks, is because underwater there is not the tracking systems equivalent under the seas as there is in the air. Most of the ocean remains unmapped in detail. Science is always discovering new life species underwater because we don't have a clear mapping of underwater terrain as we do the airspace above all the countries. So even if Russia's new underwater drone is actually nuclear powered, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what propels it. Instead, what does matter is that it is basically an underwater nuclear equipped missile. Now, this missile is very powerful, okay? It's so powerful that if it were to be detonated, it could wipe out or destroy one single missile, an area the size of the state of France or country of France, or even Great Britain. Now imagine one missile wiping out a country the size of Great Britain. That is a huge game changer. The reason Russia has developed this underwater torpedo or missile is to take out or obliterate coastal areas. Okay? Now, the largest nuclear weapon that Russia has ever detonated was the Tsar Bomba. It was 50 megaton nuclear weapon. That's 50 million tons of TNT. That was its yield, its equivalency in explosive power. Now, Putin is claiming that this new weapon contains a 100 megaton nuclear warhead. Now, that means that if this were detonated off the coast of Northern California and its Bay Area region, that it would instantly destroy some 12 million people, and it would render this territory where it was detonated useless. In fact, to completely destroy the west coast of the United States and any shipping resources, just 7 of these weapons would be needed. 2 for Alaska's coastline, 1 for the Puget Sound region in Seattle, 1 for the coastline of Oregon, 1 for the Bay Area, and 2 for Los Angeles and San Diego, just for insurance purposes. Now, a 100 megaton nuclear warhead, once again, is twice as powerful as anything previously detonated in the history of the human race. Russia, for better or for worse, holds the infamous world record for exploding the world's most powerful nuke, again named the Tsar Bomba, which was detonated on October 30th, 1961. Now, Russia initially wanted to detonate a 100 megaton version of this bomb, but they were unable to miniaturize this weapon at that time so that it would be small enough to fit on the airplane that would eventually drop it. Now today, as Putin's attack animation simulation showed during his speech, by using a combination of smaller yield nuclear warheads, all fitted into one missile or underwater drone, a combined explosive yield of 100 megatons is easily achievable. In other words, by having smaller nuclear warheads, if you have 6 or 7 of them, and their combined yields equals 100 megatons, that's how you're able to fit them in a smaller payload. And that's exactly what Russia has done. Now, if this bomb again were to be detonated, it would not only obliterate countries the size of France and Great Britain, it would render that area effectively uninhabitable by any humans for at least 100 years minimum. So it is a doomsday weapon for all practical purposes. So this is again what Russia has been working on, and there is no counter-deterrent for it. The U.S. does not have a equivalent to try to hunt this thing down, or the U.S. doesn't even have an equivalent weapon. Now, what Putin is really doing is very understandable, meaning it's easy to comprehend, and it's easily decipherable to anyone who thinks critically. If you look at all of his new generation weapons, which are ready for deployment, plenty of them are certainly in the proverbial pipeline, and once he has fully fielded all of the new weapons, this includes a new stealth fighter, this includes an entirely new class of submarines, stealth submarines, you will see that Russia will have finished, for now, its complete overhaul of its military system. Now, Russia is once again aping the United States. It is close to deploying laser-powered weapons, which can disable communications or jam them. It can even shoot down incoming missiles. And since America has even more advanced laser-based technology than Russia does, and has already developed vehicles and airborne lasers, Boeing has an airborne laser that fits on an airplane. If they're able to track one of Putin's incoming missiles in time, it can certainly be shot down, rendering them irrelevant. In other words, while Putin is boasting that his new missiles cannot be tracked, we don't know that. Hopefully we'll never have to find out. And then if it can be tracked and shot at with a laser that heats the rocket as it's in flight, it certainly can be destroyed. Now, to counter Putin, one of the things that the U.S. is doing, and this is something China is also working on as well as Russia, the United States is the first in the world to deploy basically what are new generation artillery weapons that are powered by electromagnetic fields. It's right out of something from a science fiction movie, only they're real. They already have ships now that have these weapons. The short version is that these electromagnetic powered artillery cannons, they fire a projectile that has no explosive, none at all. It's just a piece of metal that is ballistically optimized and shaped to travel at least twice the distance of conventional artillery, but for a fraction of the price. Now, you might say, well, if it has no explosive, how does it kill or destroy things? These weapons are called kinetic energy weapons. They use speed to kill, and speed does kill. The basic concept of artillery is you project something fast enough, it slams into a target with enough force to destroy it. Very simple concept, and that's what these electromagnetically charged weapons do. So they rely on speed. They travel at several times that of sound, and when they hit a target, they completely obliterate it. And that's what these new EM weapons do, and they are being deployed on naval vessels by the United States. At present, China and Russia are racing to catch up, while second-tier countries like India are essentially doing nothing on this front. Now, after the commercial break here, we'll come back and we'll continue talking about this. Then we'll segue to what Communist China is doing.
From our broadcast studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, to the world and beyond, you're watching the X-Zone Broadcast Network, www.xzbn.net.
AVS Media Den.
The scientist and the mystic have been on an age-old, relentless search with one thing in common. They seek truth. Their paths converge in the 40,000-year-old practice of shamanism, an ancient science delving to the quantum level of life, facilitating healing, manifestation, and evolution. I'm Gwilda Wiyaka, the founder and director of Path Home Shamanic Arts School, a unique Colorado State certified occupational school training shamanic practitioners and teachers. We also provide classes for empowering personal lives through shamanism. Our certification classes are in week-long segments enabling international participation, and online classes and long-distance shamanic healing sessions are available. Come discover the science of magic in the limitless world of shamanism. www.findyourpathhome.com.
Did you know that when you're on the road with limited data or Wi-Fi, you can still listen to the X-Zone Radio Show with Rob McConnell, The Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka, X-1, Dimension X, Space Patrol, and every minute of the X-Zone Broadcast Network by calling 213-401-0080, courtesy of Audio Now. No smartphone, app, or internet needed. It saves your data plan, and it's free if you have unlimited minutes. Call 213-401-0080 to listen on any phone, anytime, anywhere. Remember 213-401-0080 for the best of the paranormal, parapsychology, and sci-fi radio programming anywhere, 24/7, 365. Rob McConnell here, presenting an overview for Nicholas Paul Jennings, author of a fascinating book, Amen. It presents facts revealed by Egyptologists, facts that enable us to understand why Amen is the beginning of creation of God. It provides recommendations for religious leaders of the major religions to unify their beliefs and teach the Word of God. Love one another. Amen informs people how mankind conceived God. It was the Egyptians that developed the concepts of a soul, a hereafter, and Son of God. And finally, after the worship of many gods, they conceived the belief in one universal God, the maker of all there is. For more information, visit www.futureofgodamen.com. That's www.futureofgodamen.com.
Welcome back to Cal's Corner radio show here on the X Zone Broadcast Network. My name is Kal Korff, and I'm your host, and the executive producer of the show is the one and only Rob McConnell. Now, to wrap up what we were talking about with Russia and all of its bravado that Putin spewed forth in his recent speech about their next generation weapons, let's summarize it by saying this. In the Middle East, Russia is finally, for the first time, field testing some of these new generation weapons. They're doing it in the country of Syria because the war has been going on there for several years. This is a war that one can argue that former American President Barack Obama played a key role in starting, or at least escalating, because we have to remember that it was Barack Obama and his then Secretary of State Hillary Clinton who got the bright idea to go ahead and try to engage in regime change and topple Syria's brutal dictator, Bashar Assad. What they didn't factor in was that Russia and Iran, the two powers that back Syria and effectively keep Assad in power, would not stand idly by and just sit by and let America oust him. America could easily eliminate Assad today. All they would have to do is target him directly and fire missiles at him, and he would be gone. But we're not supposed to do that kind of thing according to international law. But what Obama had done is he had helped topple the dictator of Libya, Muammar Gaddafi, and of course did help play a key role in toppling one of America's staunchest allies in the Middle East, our greatest ally other than Israel, which was the former dictator of Egypt, Hosni Mubarak. Working with the radical Muslim Brotherhood, of all things, the Obama administration also worked with private companies such as Google and Pepsi to go ahead and use social media to force Mubarak out. And then, of course, they tried to do a triple, which was to get rid of Assad as well. And it blew up in their face. And because of that, at least half of Syria's population has been displaced. So I don't feel sorry for the United States when it takes in Syrian refugees. In my opinion, that's the least we can do, since we are a key cause of why there are war refugees in the first place. Now, to be clear, this does not mean that Syria would have been a land of milk and honey and peace and stability had Obama and Clinton not messed up and tried to oust Assad. Where their crime exists, other than the tremendous suffering and war crimes committed as a consequence of the violence there, which was stirred up, is that Obama and Clinton never had a viable successor lined up to replace Assad. In other words, they were basically pulling out a page from George Bush's foreign policy, which both of them condemned hypocritically. When Bush said, let's get rid of Saddam Hussein in Iraq, the brutal Iraqi dictator there, who did commit genocide and murdered roughly 1 million people during his regime, there was no viable replacement for Saddam Hussein. Yet they worked to overthrow him anyway and said, let's let the Iraqis sort out the mess. That was the approach that they took with Assad, and it was wrong. It was especially cynical, calculating, and hypocritical, because both of them condemned this type of behavior, but yet when they end up in power running the country, Obama as president, Clinton as his Secretary of State, they end up doing exactly what they campaigned against. Now, if that isn't hypocrisy, nothing is. So all these years later, Syria remains a mess. Russia has won that war, meaning the so-called rebels or freedom fighters, as we love to euphemistically call them, who the U.S. has spent over $1 billion training. They've pretty much packed up and left, and a lot of them are no longer fighting, and the whole thing has been a debacle. And Obama and Hillary Clinton were never held accountable for what they did. And independent of the hypocrisy of both of those politicians, let's look at the principle here. Does the United States of America have the right to go ahead and overthrow the governments of other countries while condemning other nations for doing the same thing? The answer in general on this principle is that no, it does not. Yet the United States has done this over 75 times in modern history. You can look it up. Just Google terms like regime change by the United States, and you'll see a whole list of countries where the United States has basically overthrown a dictator it didn't like, or it has put a dictator it does like into power. Russia has done the same thing. Superpowers tend to do this. It's a fact of history. This does not make it automatically right. So, what happens now with Russia and China upgrading their militaries, with China now having a stealth fighter that it has deployed, ready for combat operations now? That stealth fighter exists because they essentially hacked and stole the blueprints for the American Joint Strike Fighter when Obama was president. Now Russia has its new stealth fighter. It is actually seeing combat operations being tested in Syria. It will be rolled out and officially put into action on a massive scale in their Air Force. How do you contain Russia? How do you contain China? You can't defeat them. Nobody wants a world war. Well, the way you do it is you take nations which are in the region and you form alliances to try to contain or make the price so high that Russia and China cannot afford to fight a war. Now, I will tell you that in my opinion, I've reported on this for many years, Russia is not the biggest threat to world peace today. Instead, I continue to argue that communist China is the greatest threat to world peace for everyone on this earth. And let me briefly explain why. China actually has two major programs that are now being worked. They're official Chinese policy. One is called the 2020 Plan. That's the name of it. And we know it exists. We know that it's real because the military plans that drive it have been leaked to the public. The 2020 Plan, the short version of it, calls for China to invade Taiwan. It regards Taiwan as a rogue province of Communist China. The Taiwanese feel different. They feel like they're their own country, but Beijing is not going to allow them to get away with that. So what they have done is their goal is to try to subvert or conquer Taiwan by the year 2020. Now, it's not 2020 yet. It's still 2 years away. But if something doesn't happen to stop China from proceeding, it's going to happen, folks. There's no question. Now, the short version of what China intends to do by military force, if necessary, although it would prefer a more peaceful type of revolution, such as an economic coup, is they plan to send 500,000 military troops to invade 16 different points on the island, to fire 1,000 ballistic missiles on Taiwan simultaneously while an amphibious assault is launched. It is not a coincidence that China has about 1,000 missiles now pointed at Taiwan. They're not being pointed there for show. They intend to use them if necessary. The idea is to conquer Taiwan at such a fast pace that it doesn't give Japan and the United States enough time to respond to try to come to Taiwan's defense. That's the idea. China's version of a blitzkrieg, if you will. What China is also doing is they're building artificial islands, and then they claim that those islands are part of Chinese territory, and by international law, they can declare sovereignty over that and essentially lay claim to almost all of the South China Sea, which is a vital shipping route that the world depends on for transportation, import, exporting of goods. So by erecting an island, you further extend your so-called theoretical territory, and that's what China is doing. And it's not a coincidence that China is also militarizing these new artificial islands, because what China wants to do is dominate Asia first, get a lead that nobody can stop, and then they're going to proceed with their 2050 plan, that's also the name of that official plan, if you will, to knock the United States off from being the world's only superpower, to be replaced, of course, by communist China. And the way that they're doing that is they have engaged in a series of outreach foreign policy initiatives to everybody from Europe to Africa, where they come in all smiling and say, hey, we want to partner with you. And what these countries do when they enter into agreements with China is they end up eventually over time owing China or being subservient to China. Just look at the country of Pakistan, which of course borders India. Pakistan would love for nothing more than to destroy India. It doesn't like the fact that India exists. And we must remember that parts of what are now called Pakistan used to be India. Same with parts of what are now called Afghanistan used to be part of India as well. In the 7 years that I lived in India, I lived in a state called Punjab, okay? Half of that state, roughly, is in Pakistan. The other half is in India. So Punjabis are both Pakistanis and Indians. So what happened was a state was envisioned by the British and essentially requested by the Muslims so that it could be a state where Muslims could exist but still be part of Punjab. So later Pakistan was born. And India, of course, has an enormously large population of Muslims, several hundred million of them. It's a country of roughly 1.3 billion people. And hundreds of millions of them are Muslims. In fact, there are more Muslims in India than there are in Pakistan. Now, we'll be back after the commercial break here, and we'll continue with India and why it's relevant to trying to contain Russia and China after this commercial break.
Zone? Now watch it on Simul TV, plus 500 video games, live TV channels, free video on demand, worldwide, and more. Does this sound like tomorrow's television? Well, it is, but you can have it today, right now. It is Simul TV. Simul TV offers what the others only wish they could provide. 15 exclusive channels like X-Zone, Sci-Fi, and Horror. We are worldwide. No other provider offers that. 500 built-in video games. No need to have an extra expensive system. We have them included. Free video on demand. Live streaming events from around the world. Interactive online network, and much more. Tomorrow's TV today. Simul TV. Sound too good to be true? Well, it's not. You can have Simul TV today. Sign up at simultv.com. Do it today.
The new nonfiction book, Razor of Madness, is similar to cult movies like Clockwork Orange, Dragon's Tattoo, or The Other Side of Hell. Wayne Morin Jr. and Thomas Lee Howell expose widespread and systematic deficiencies in this thought-provoking tell-all novel. Mind control rages among scholars in law schools. Human rights are ignored while thought reform and mental manipulation are accepted practices used as behavior modification. Dr. Louis Jolyon West comes to mind. Media and public scrutiny shows that United States mental hospitals are in fact destructive murder industries. Razor of Madness expose novel details this epidemic through an in-depth professional and personal investigation. For decades, there has been a revolving door policy that still releases killers and pedophiles back into society. The maestro of mind control continues to haunt America to this very day. Razor of Madness is available in paperback or as a downloadable ebook at Amazon.com.
I'm William S. Peckham. If you enjoy a good mystery with a touch of the paranormal, then you'll love my novel, From Out of the Woodwork. It's the story of a young Toronto contractor, Sean Kennedy, who buys derelict homes, guts them, and turns them into multifamily dwellings. Slums just waiting to happen. When Sean buys 29 Livery Lane, the house fights back. Former owners unexpectedly come out of the woodwork as he starts the destruction. The apparitions come to him when he touches old books, reads hidden letters, rummages through old boxes, finds a locket, or reads a discovered manuscript of a murder mystery. From Out of the Woodwork will take you from 1899 to the horror of the World Trade Center, September 11, 2001. Check out From Out of the Woodwork on my website, www.williamspeckham.com.
Welcome back to the fourth and final segment here on Cal's Corner Radio Show on the X-Zone Broadcast Network. My name is Kal Korff, and I'm your host. The executive producer of the show, once again, is Rob McConnell. So in Asia, which is the fastest rising economic zone, if you will, in the entire planet, as well as population-wise, we have some very interesting geopolitical dynamics going on, the short version of which are this. You have India, which is the world's largest democracy. Let's be blunt, it's also the world's most corrupt democracy and the world's most superstitious country. India has double-digit growth in its economy as more of a rule than an exception. And in the near future, it will surpass communist China population-wise, where it will be the most populous nation in the earth. Now, India also has the largest middle class in the world, and it has the largest number of people under age 30. Now, if you take all of those factors and combine them, any nation having those dynamics, a nation that's on a roll economically and development-wise, they're good numbers to have. China, on the other hand, at least population-wise, is starting to experience a decline. For decades, China made it illegal or very expensive. You had to pay fines if you had more than one child. Well, after decades of enforcing that policy, where often second children were murdered, even female children were murdered because they wanted male offspring, India also does the same thing. In fact, in India, they had to pass a law that even today is still on the books. If a couple is married and they're going to have a child, they're not allowed by law to know the sex of that child in India, even today. The reason they passed that law is because enough Indians, disgracefully, shamefully, immorally, would murder their own child if it was a female. They wanted male heirs. So the reason that Indians today legally cannot know ahead of time what the sex of their child is to help give a fighting chance or a surviving chance that that child will not be murdered by its own parents or relatives. It's heartbreaking and disgraceful to even describe this type of infanticide, but that is the mentality, unfortunately, of too many people in India, and that's why that law exists. So India will be, for better or for worse, the most populous nation on earth, followed by China. The two regional superpowers in Asia are unquestionably Russia and China. Now, since China and Russia are far superior militarily to India, how does the West and how does India, how do they cooperate to help be a viable deterrent against Russian or Chinese aggression? Well, first of all, there really is, for all practical purposes, no real Russian aggression. Russia does not have plans active to conquer or subdue India. What it does love to do is sell weapons to India, and it used to be India's largest supplier of weapons, but India, in the last few years, has dumped Russia down to number 3, and instead they buy most of their weapons now from the United States and Israel. What India also does with Russia is they kind of throw them a bone in exchange for peaceful relations. Last year, and I reported on this, Prime Minister Narendra Modi in India spent roughly $1 billion to buy the Russian S-400 anti-missile defense system. Well, that was a waste of money because the S-400 is easily defeated. Israel and the United States figured out how to beat that system about a decade ago. So it makes no sense for India to waste $1 billion on that system when they could use that same money to, God forbid, help their own people, or buy more updated modern weapons from Israel and the United States, ones that cannot be defeated. But the real reason, most likely, because you'd have to ask Modi for the reason he did it, and hopefully he'd tell the truth, who knows. The reason that he gave Putin $1 billion is to help ensure that the flow of Russian spare parts for the outdated MiG aircraft would continue on an uninterrupted basis. In other words, it's basically a bribe disguised as an arms deal to go ahead and continue the smooth flow of spare parts, which are badly needed, of course, for any military who has weapons like that which Russia buys. Now, what you do with India is you admit and acknowledge that it's never going to get its act together, not compared to the United States, China, or even Russia. And what I mean by that is this. India has been upgrading its military for many years now, especially under Modi. It has commendably been buying some very smart choice weapons from Israel and the United States. But the Indian military is, to use an analogy, very much like a piece of Swiss cheese. It's got so many holes in it that the enemy can exploit that. And Pakistan doesn't have the resources, it doesn't have the money to spend and try to keep upgrades going to compete against India. So what China has done is it has come to Pakistan's rescue. China is now making the ballistic missiles, the medium-range missiles that Pakistan is putting in its military, which it would use against India in any conflict. China is happy to pay this bill because, like communist North Korea, it loves the idea and supports the idea and encourages the idea to use Pakistan as essentially a useful idiot country to bother and pester India. Now, China knows that it can beat India militarily anytime it wants to. When they fought their last war in early 1960s, China beat the you-know-what out of India. India had literally no weapons to defend itself with. Now, Pakistan can't afford an arms race against India. It doesn't have the know-how, it doesn't have the means, it doesn't have the money. So what it's done is it's allowed China to step in and fill the void, and China's happy to do that. In fact, of the 5 nuclear reactors that are now under construction, the new ones, which will also turn out additional nuclear material to make nuclear weapons for Pakistan, guess who's paying for all of them? China. Okay? So rather than build bigger missiles, which it doesn't know how to do, and China's not going to give Pakistan its best stuff, what China is helping Pakistan do is develop what are called suitcase tactical nukes. These are small nuclear weapons that will destroy, by nuclear standards, a small area of territory, say a few city blocks. The radioactive footprint would be smaller, but the nuclear weapon would be so small that it could fit in a suitcase or the backpack of a terrorist, and Pakistan would continue to do what they've always done for decades now, which is release or help sneak terrorists in across Indian territory. Those people would pick a target, detonate a nuke, and Pakistan would deny any formal knowledge of it, and maybe they would say, oh, nukes were stolen, we couldn't control it. Therefore, there would be this plausible deniability. This scenario is not so far-fetched that it can never happen. In fact, you can easily Google examples of how suitcase nukes have disappeared, or that attempts to make them or smuggle them have been stopped, thankfully, by global law enforcement. Just because some incidents have failed in the past does not mean that there will not be successes in the future. Now, India has a problem in that it is not working on fast enough, and it cannot develop fast enough, the types of weapons that are needed to be a deterrent by itself against China. India doesn't have stealth anything. Doesn't exist. They're not about to release a stealth fighter. The United States is not going to give, at least as of this broadcast, India the Joint Strike Fighter, although Israel has it, more dependable, reliable allies. So what do you do with India? You need their help to help contain China, but it's kind of like dragging someone to the party who's a weak point on your team. How do you plug this gap? Well, what you do is you form an alliance, and that's exactly what the United States is doing. The The United States under Barack Obama, when he was president, commendably figured out the obvious, that there are other countries out there who don't like the idea of China becoming the world superpower as well. They don't want China becoming more belligerent. Those countries include Australia, New Zealand, Vietnam, Thailand, of course, Taiwan. They also include Japan. They also include India. Pakistan, of course, loves China because China gives it free stuff. So what the United States is doing, and they're to be commended for it, is they are forming these alliances consisting of these nations, working together to create a defensive wall, if you will, that if China dares to try to attack it or break it, the cost will be so high that the Chinese would never be that stupid. China may be a lot of things, but China is not stupid overall. Right now, as this broadcast airs, the USS Carl Vinson, the aircraft carrier, is stationed at a dock in Vietnam because Vietnam is now part of the alliance against China. Under Barack Obama, permission was granted for Vietnam to buy some of America's most advanced weapons. It bothers China, but who cares? So that is how India can survive, is its military defense, our military machinery can be integrated with this coalition so that China cannot afford to attack it or go to war against it. That is the only way you're going to contain China militarily. Economic-wise, you have to do other things. We can talk about that later. There's not enough time on this show to go into that issue. But that is exactly what's going on now. And news just broke a little bit ago that apparently American President Donald Trump will be meeting with the dictator of communist North Korea sometime in the next couple of months, mano a mano. We'll see how that goes, and hopefully that means that the tensions in that peninsula will stand down. My name is Kal Korff. Thanks for joining me. We'll see you next week on another episode of Kal's Corner Radio. Thank you.
Modern Esoteric, Beyond Our Senses by Brad Olson, consummates the lifeology story about where humanity originates. It is the lost continents, the primitive wisdom, the mythos of creation, and the rethinking of ancient history as we are taught in academia. There is much more to the story than what we have been told. As this is the first book in the Esoteric series, Modern Esoteric starts at the beginning of time and accelerates up to this modern age. Future Esoteric is book 2 in the series and takes a forward-looking position ahead of today with an open and honest examination of the ET issue and various unexplained phenomena. To discover the writings of author Brad Olson, visit www.bradolson.com. That's www.bradolson.com. Are you or is someone you know struggling with addictions, depression, anxiety, relationships, low self-esteem, lack of confidence, grief, success, and prosperity? Do you know that your subconscious belief plays a big role in the outcome of your hard work? We can help you permanently change the beliefs that may be the reason for your struggles and failures. We care about getting you the return on your investment and the results you are looking for. We can help you be free of the limitations of your past and in realizing your highest potential. We work with people by phone and Skype. For more information, visit us at www.ritasoman.com. That's www.ritasoman.com. Do you think you have energy problems in your home? Do you feel better when you're away than when you're home? Joey Korn is a global leader in the world of dowsing who specializes in personal energy clearing and space clearing. He can help you create an ideal energy environment in your home no matter where you live in the world. Learn about his remote spiritual house cleaning services and much more at www.dowsers.com. You can get Joey's book, Dowsing, A Path to Enlightenment, as well as other dowsing books and tools, Kabbalah books, and Walter Russell books. Joey's work is really amazing. Go to dowsers.com right now. That's DOWSERS.com, or call 1-877-DOWSING. That's 1-877-369-7464.